Hey guys, my name's Doug with Infotainment.com. Today we're working on the 2019 and up Chevrolet Silverado. Now this includes the 1500 and the heavy duties. Furthermore, this also includes all of the 2019 and up GMC Sierra trucks. Today we have an awesome upgrade we're gonna show you guys how to install. It is the IOR option code infotainment system to the IOU option code infotainment system. Now GM calls it the Infotainment 3 and the Infotainment 3 Plus system. So we're gonna show you guys how to upgrade that system. So a lot of your base model vehicles like your work truck, your custom Trail Boss, your LT, your RST, they're all going to feature the base model radio. So if you want the radio that's in the upper trim levels, like the High Country and the Denali and so on and so forth, keep watching. We're gonna show you guys how to upgrade from the base model system to the premium system. Now, some of the awesome features you're going to gain by getting into that IOU option code system, you're gonna get an HD quality backup camera. You're going to get an HD quality touchscreen display in your center stack. You're going to get HD radio. You're going to get GPS navigation built into the system. You'll get full 3D maps, GPS navigation. Another really cool option is those of you who do not have SiriusXM satellite radio, now's the time to add it because that is built into the IOU option code system. So we can include a factory antenna that just swaps with the one that's on your roof, and you'll be able to gain SiriusXM satellite radio. So that is another option you could take advantage of if you don't already have it. And best of all, you'll get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So just a mountain of features and conveniences when you go to that Infotainment 3 Plus system, the IOU option code. So today, again, we're gonna show you guys how to install the system. So let's get started.
All right, so the first thing you're gonna need is a little panel tool. You're gonna wanna take this silver bezel off of the radio bezel here. There's a couple of Torx back here that we need to access. We'll just wedge our tool in and start snapping it. Oop. Just work your way around the bezel, or this trim piece on the bezel, and remove all the retaining clips that hold that piece on. And you got a couple of Torx up here. There's two more on the bottom that we'll get to in a second. And these are a T10. All right, so what you want to do is pull this little panel back a little bit. This cover piece here, there's two more Torx bits underneath there. They're T10 Torx. You don't have to remove the panel all the way. You just need to pop it loose so you can access those screws. And right there, you got one and one on the other side. So take those off. All right, and at this point, this whole bezel is ready to be removed. And just pull back and it should pop off fairly easily. So once you get your bezel off, you're gonna need to remove this plastic housing that holds your screen on so we can get that screen replaced. You're gonna need a T15 and a T10 Torx. All right, once you remove all the screws, this should lift out here. And pull these screws out of there. Once you have your little plastic cover removed, you'll see this little ribbon cable here. You're gonna have to get this ribbon cable out of there. So to do that, it's just this little flapper that's actually securing that ribbon cable. You flip that in the upwards position, that'll come out, and then you pull your screen right out of there. Now you'll set your new screen in place and make sure it seats in there all the way. Pull your little flapper up here that holds your ribbon cable in place and slide your ribbon cable back in. You can give it a nice little tug, make sure it's secured in there. Now we can reassemble. Got our screen's little cover plate here. And we'll secure that back down with the T10s that we removed earlier. And be careful with these little T10s. They aren't attached to this plastic piece. I just kind of balanced it so it stayed in place, but you don't want to lose those things because you'll never find them. All right, so once you complete your screen install, we can go ahead and change out our little media hub. Super simple. There's on the back side of that hub, you have just some plastic press clips. You can do it with your fingers, but it might be easier to use a little panel tool. Just press those while pushing out, and it pops right out of there. And the new one goes back in the same orientation as the old one. Just snap that back into place. And there you go. All right, so after we get our screen swapped out, we need to replace our HMI module. This is our nav-enabled wireless CarPlay HMI module. And basically, because it's kind of hard to see up underneath the dash there, we have a similar bracket, mounting bracket that holds that HDMI out here so you can see what we're going to be doing. So basically there's nothing that holds this module in besides these two clips. So once you remove all the plugs on your old module, you're basically just pulling these down and sliding out your module straight out of the bottom. So this is going to be situated under your dash in this fashion here, or in this manner. And you want to slide that out, and then you can slide your new HMI module right back in its place. So before we change out our module, our HMI module, we want to pull off a couple of panels here. One's that kick panel, the other one is this lower dash console panel here that we pulled off earlier to access the radio screws. We're going to want to remove this to ease us running some wires over to the driver's side. So to do that, you're going to get a 7mm driver or socket and pull out that one 7mm screw. And at this point, there shouldn't really be anything holding it in since you popped it off with the radio, and you can just pull it the rest of the way out. Like that. So the next step before we pull off our little kick panel and door sill here is we have to remove this little seat bracket cover, and this is pretty easy to come off. You just lift up on it, and it should just pop right out. It just snaps out of there, and then we can get our door sill, and that'll just pop up and give it a nice pull back, and you're going to release those clips that hold your door sill and kick panel piece on. All right, so it's only possible to remove all these plugs when the module's up in there, because you won't be able to pull the module completely out with these wires keeping tension on it. So we just pulled this out and replug this in this position so you can get a better view of all the connectors that you need to disconnect on the bottom side of this module here. And pretty straightforward. Just kind of depress all the little clips that hold everything in. This last one down here might be a little tight. We're gonna use our flathead to get this one out. There we go. And you can set this aside and grab your new module. Get your module and slide it up in there. The same way you pulled your other one out. All right, and there you have it. Now, once your module's up there, you can go ahead and plug in all your harnesses here. And they'll only go one way. So if it doesn't fit, don't force it. And as far as the antenna line here, we're gonna reach up in there and just clip it in. There you go. You're gonna wanna match the black plug to the black connector. All the other connectors are gonna be different colors. Just match the colors when you're plugging that antenna line back in. And then you're gonna be left with your hub wires that have to be ran to the center console. And a T-harness that's gonna go underneath your driver's side knee bolster. And lastly, you need to do the rear view camera swap as well, so you have rear view camera image. And we're gonna do this after we finish up everything else. All right, now you're gonna wanna take your 3 sets of wires here and zip tie them along this other wiring harness underneath here. So after you zip tie your wires up on that harness, you can bundle your wires up to a little loop here, help you run the wires a little easier. And you want to come behind this lower bumper support here. Just kind of string your wires behind there. That way when you put your panels back on, you know it's not going to be pinching any of your wiring. So the T-harness wire, you can pretty much kind of just tuck it up in there so it's wedged in there. And at this point in time, and we'll take it and run it up around. We're gonna take this T-harness and run it right up over the lower dash knee bolster mount there. Pull the wires through. All right, so with your T-harness, you're gonna want to route it underneath your driver's side knee bolster, up underneath the dash. It's right around where that gear shift is. You're just gonna work your way straight down, and you got your module right here. It's right above this, your foot or leg AC vents. You're gonna unplug that factory connector there and add in your T-harness that's running over to your new screen. And once you get those plugged in, you can zip tie all the wires up there so they're not dangling above your foot pedals. So the next thing we're going to want to do is change out our antenna here. This is right above the driver's side on the roof here. And basically you got to pull off a couple of panels on your truck here. You got to pull off the A-pillar, the sun visor, and drop your headliner a little bit so you can access this. So it's going to be kind of hard to see in there. because we're not taking the headliner completely off. We're just kind of giving it, giving a little gap in there so we can fit our hands. But essentially, this is all you're wanting to do is take off this little mounting plate here and 10mm bolt, and your antenna will pop right off. Once you get your A-pillar out, and we can show you that the plugs are in your A-pillar here, those will just unplug. And once you have your old one removed, we'll show you we'll show you the new one going in. On the inside of your A-pillar here, you got a couple of plastic caps here. You got to pop off, don't lose them. And once you get those popped out of there, use a little flathead. You'll expose the two 10mm bolts that hold on your A-pillar. You're gonna wanna remove those two. All right, then your pillar should just pop free. You're gonna wanna pull inwards and then lift upwards. And that should remove your A-pillar. We'll set that aside, and on the inside here, you'll see our antenna connectors here. So once you unplug your antenna line here, you can go ahead and pop your visor out, and right at the base of your visor, you got this little plastic cap that is covering a couple of screws, and there is a splice in there. There is a splice in there, so you can, once you cap that, pop that cap off, you can just kind of work it around your sun visor little mount here. And on the inside of your mount, you got 3 T15 Torx bits holding the base on. And on the other side, there's a little notch that you can stick a tiny little flat blade in to open that little cover. And there's another T15 holding this in. We'll go ahead and remove all of those. All right, you can go ahead and remove your sun visor. Now, in some models, you have a connector here for a light on your, for an illuminated sun visor. If you got that plug, don't let it hang by the plug. Make sure to unplug that. And set this aside for now. Now from here, you can pull back your headliner just enough where you can access the 10mm bolt holding on your antenna. So with an open end wrench, you're gonna wanna reach up in there and loosen that guy up. All right. Once you got your little retaining bracket off, you can pull your antenna out of there. All right, once you get your bolt retaining plate off, you can pull your antenna right out of the roof hole there. All right, so grab your new antenna here and fish the new antenna wires or antenna lines down into the hole. If your roof is dirty like ours is, I would recommend cleaning that before you put this back on. Just set it back in place. And now from the bottom, we can just go back in there with our 10mm bolt and the little mounting plate that holds us on. I'm gonna get that nice and snug. Don't over tighten it. Just when it feels like it's nice and snug, that's plenty. It's not gonna go anywhere. All right, and there's your bolt and retaining clip, all nice and snugged up. And now we can put our headliner back up. Right. With your headliner pulled down, you're gonna wanna get it back up. And underneath this weather stripping here, you can kind of just pull that stripping out and work it back in there. right, now we can put our visors back in and plug our antenna in. So with your new antenna line hanging down here, you'll notice an extra line on there. Included with the kit is this extension. So this is actually for your XM, so you're gonna need to run this all the way over to that HMI module underneath the passenger side dash. So what we can do is plug in our factory connector and take our new line. And sometimes you can just drop this down into the opening here and it'll reach the bottom. But if you have any problems doing that, you can just take this panel right here, pop this off. And be careful when you're fishing this line through here. There's a lot of metal and sharp edges, and you don't want to pull too hard and then cut into the antenna line as you're running it down. Just kind of be gentle with it. And once you get all the slack removed, you can go ahead and zip tie these wires up in here. All right, with your wire secured, you can grab your A-pillar and slide it back into place. Pretty much the reverse of how you took it off. The bottom edge will kind of push forward and into that little crevice down there. And it may make it easier to pull the weather stripping out a little bit. So when you get to the passenger side with your XM antenna wire here, you'll notice the connector is blue. We've also included your replacement camera and its line, and this is the same, pretty much the same color. These are just universal Fokker connectors. So you want to make sure that you plug them into their corresponding correct colors. So the other end of your XM antenna has a mustard yellow type color. It's going to be the same color on that HMI unit. So it's going to be a mustard color connector on that HMI you're going to plug this one into. And how this camera is orange, the other end of this camera line, HMI is also going to be orange. So you want to make sure that you just, even though the colors are the same, you don't get those mixed up. So the one that goes to orange on here will go to orange on your HMI. All right, so at the other end of your XM antenna, that mustard colored connector on your antenna, you're gonna plug it into this mustard colored connector on the HMI unit. Camera line is also this bluish teal color, but the camera end is orange. We're gonna plug this into orange here. The camera in the way. There you go. And while we're under here, right up in here is where we're gonna feed our camera through, that camera line. So we're gonna go in that little hole right there, and we'll show you the wire popping out on the other side. So at the end of your wire here, you have your little connector here. To make it easier to remove, you can just pull this little center out. You get a little flathead. Stick it in there, that piece will pop up. You pull that out, and you can pull that right out of there. And this is much easier to run through your grommet. Then when you get it through there, slide that back in, put your little locking piece back in, and you'll be good to go once it's on the other side. So basically, to give you a little demonstration of what I did to that grommet is I'm going to use this little screwdriver handle here. It's a little protruding end of rubber coming out of that firewall grommet, and all I did was, it's very soft rubber. All you need is a little box razor, and you just kind of rub it on the side, and it'll just start to peel back. It's so easy to cut through. And you don't have to cut the whole thing all the way off. I kind of want to leave that flap on there. So once the wire goes through, it'll kind of seal it back up. You can also get some silicone or butyl rubber strip caulking or something and cover that cut that you made up, so you don't have any kind of issues with water or anything. And once you have that hole sealed up and the wire's through, I always recommend looming your wire just to give it a little bit more protection. It also makes it easier to zip tie when you're running it underneath the vehicle. But now that we have the wire through this point, we can put our connector back on. Same way we took it off, slide that Fakra end on and put the little clip in place, and that'll lock it in place. So you're just gonna hug the firewall. You're gonna go straight down behind all these lines and the pipe and everything. You don't want to wrap that wire around anything. Just go straight down, and we're gonna catch that wire coming out from underneath the vehicle there. All right, so from underneath the vehicle, you can see this is your felt lined wheel well liner. You can see the wires already hanging down here. So you can take and pull the rest of that wire out of here. And what I like to do is bring it around this body mount, bring it right around that body mount, right onto the top side. And right above it, you'll see the frame and the wires running straight to the back. So that's where we're gonna zip tie this camera wire to. Get your zip tie. Bring your zip tie around this main wiring harness going to the rear. And zip tie them up. Coming around the frame here, it's underneath the bed. There we go. Have some gloves to protect yourself. I would definitely use it. These frames are usually wet with underbody coating, or the underbody coating is dry and it just flakes off. It gets kind of messy. So I'd recommend getting some gloves or wearing some gloves before you attempt to zip tie this along the frame. So running that line underneath, basically avoid anything hot. All right, so when you're running that wire, you just want to make sure that you're avoiding hot or moving parts. So the exhaust, the suspension, just avoid all that stuff. It's always a good rule of thumb to kind of just follow that factory wiring harness, because you know they routed it in a safe direction. I can throw a zip tie in here, and it might be a good idea to grab yourself some goggles as well as some gloves for underneath the vehicle. It's not really a very user-friendly environment under here. You want to protect your eyes as much as possible from falling debris. And again, if you got some kind of fish wire or a big zip tie, that would definitely help you out here. All right, so before we run the wire for our camera all the way into the tailgate, once we get it kind of in the rear section of the vehicle, I like to expose the innards of the tailgate, remove the access panel, just so when we get that wire towards the rear here, we can see what we're doing and work our way up into the tailgate. So to do that, it is a T20 Torx, and you have quite a bit of them going around. Maybe there's 10 of them. So we can just start removing all of those. And if you don't have a T20, I don't recommend using a Torx bit that's close, just because these have a tendency to strip out. And sometimes, depending how old your vehicle are, or how old your vehicle is, it can be pretty tight in there. Oops. Pull your panel off and set this aside. Once you have your access panel removed, you'll expose all of your rods and everything for your handle, and you'll see your camera line and how that is ran. And basically, we're just going to take our camera line and run it along these this same harness. We're not going to remove this harness, we're just going to unplug it, but we're going to utilize all these connection points here and zip tie our wire along there. The only thing that's holding this handle in is a couple of 10 mils located right down through these holes here. You're going to need an extension because they're pretty deep down there. And you have a single cable, or a single rod rather, holding on your handle, as well as your plug for your camera. All right, so on your original camera wire, you got the same type of red safety connector there. Pull that out, depress your button, and that should pop right out. All right, so after you remove your wire, you got your little handle rod here attached to your lock assembly or your latch assembly. So it's just a spin type lock. You pop that off, slide it out of the way, and lift up. And once that's clear, there's nothing else holding that handle on but those two 10 mils, so we'll pull those out now. All right, once your handle's free, it's got a couple of retaining clips. All you have to do is kind of push down on it, and your whole handle will pop free. So all I did was push down on this, and it just pops right out there. Be mindful of this as you're pulling it out of the tailgate. You don't want to scratch your paint up with this rod here. And from here, you'll see our camera, and this is what we're going to be changing out. All right, and the camera is also a T20. So pretty convenient. Same screws that you took your tailgate cap off with, or same size for that camera. And with your new camera, you'll see it will only go on one way. So this bracket will only go on one way. Can't get that wrong. So make sure your camera lines up and put your two Torx back in. All right, set your other camera to the side. We will not be using that anymore. And same thing like before, and it's gonna string this handle back up in there, and be mindful of this rod here. All right, once it snaps back into place, you can put your little rod back on, and your 10mm bolts back in. All right, so once you get your wire up through that access hole, you can pull all your slack out. Now, you don't want to pull it tight because when you close the tailgate, you're going to want it to give a little bit. So if you pull it tight, it may start stretching that line if it's too tight. So once you reach the stopping point, just push it back a little bit just so it has some play in there, and then you can throw a zip tie around there. And you can just zip tie it along your camera line here so it's secure. All right, now when you get to here, again with your excess, kind of just make a little service loop. Your wire may be a little bit shorter than this one. So we have quite a bit of excess here. But we'll just make a small little service loop here and throw a zip tie on it so it's nice and organized. And we'll plug our line back in. And with that plugged in, your little bundle of wire that you made, you can zip tie that up so it doesn't interfere with any of the handles, rods, or anything. Once that tailgate piece is back, it's going to stay nice and secure there. All right. And now we can go ahead and reassemble our tailgate. Line up your access panel here with all the holes in your tailgate, the threaded holes in your tailgate. And what I like to do is thread them all in a little bit before you tighten. Just so you know everything is lined up. All right, and there you go. All right, so once you have all your lines ran, you're gonna wanna take note of the two lines that you're gonna use that are supplied with your kit. You're not gonna use the factory ones that were on here. So you got your screen input right here. You're gonna wanna use the new one that comes with your kit, as well as the new media hub plug, because we changed out that media hub so you have an SD card for your maps. So the factory one is not going to be used. Just keep that in mind when you're putting everything back together. You're going to have two extra lines. Just tuck them out of the way when you're plugging everything back in. So you grab your bezel and start plugging everything back in here. And because there's so many plugs, it might be a good idea to just work your way from the bottom up, just so you're not really forgetting anything. You'll see what you're missing and what you're not. And make sure to plug your plugs in and depress that little red security tab on the back of your plugs so those plugs get locked into place. And once you get all your plugs plugged in, you'll notice you got a whole lot of extra line here for the new lines that we just plugged in. What I like to do is make little loops on these and then zip tie them up so there's not a whole bunch of excess hanging all over the place. So once you plug it in, you'll know how much you'll need. Just get a little loop on there and zip tie that up. And once you cut that zip tie, you can just kind of stuff it in one of the cavities here. And once you do that to both lines, you can go ahead and push the bezel back into place. Once you got your screws back in place, go ahead and tap your trim piece back over to conceal those screws. We can go ahead and clean up the rest of the install, zip tying the wires underneath your dash at this point. All right, so once you've connected all your wires, connected all your connections, ran all your line, plugged in the radio, and you made sure everything worked, that's when I like to reassemble everything. So once we check the function of our radio, we can go ahead and put our module back in that we removed earlier up underneath the dash with the two 10 mils here. All right, and it's gonna be kind of hard to see the one on top, but yep, there's one more just like this right above it. These factory wires right here, we're not going to be using. We got our upgraded wires already running from the HMI. So we're just going to tuck these out of the way. They're not connected to anything, so you don't have to worry about them touching anything funny. And then this is our XM antenna line. We made a little bundle just like behind the radio. We can just kind of tuck that out of the way. So when we're putting back our kick panel, we don't have any issues with wires getting in the way. All right, and you want to grab your kick panel with your door sill. Snap that back into place. Line up all the little clips under there, and then you can get your seat mount cover here and slide that over top. It's a tight fit, but line up all the little pins in there and that'll snap back into place as well. All right, and lastly, you want to put your center dash piece back on, slide it over that little trans tunnel there, and line up all the little clips. And we can put our 7mm little bolt back in on the driver's side.